The desert moon of Calith burned violet above the ruins, its light glinting off shattered alien metal and drifting ash. Ethan Cole had never planned to be a hero. He was a human engineer contracted to repair jump gates on the edge of known space. When the pirate ambush hit, everything became noise and fire, ships screaming across the sky and plasma carving the ground apart. Ethan ran because survival was instinct, not bravery. That was when he heard the cry, sharp and desperate, not human. Pinned beneath a collapsed transport was a young alien woman, her silver skin smeared with blood, four glowing eyes dim with pain. Ethan hesitated, only a heartbeat. Pirates hated witnesses and aliens were dangerous, or so every briefing said. Still he moved, muscles screaming as he wedged a metal beam free and dragged her out just as the transport exploded behind them. They hid among crystal spires until the fighting faded. She stared at him in shock, then bowed her head despite her injuries. Ethan wrapped her wounds with his own emergency kit and called for help on a battered comm. When a royal carrier descended from the sky hours later, soldiers poured out with weapons raised. The wounded alien straightened and spoke with quiet authority, and the soldiers froze. Only then did Ethan realize who he had saved. She was no common traveler. She was royalty, daughter of the alien queen of the Violian Dominion. And Ethan Cole was suddenly at the center of an interstellar fate he could never have imagined. Ethan expected gratitude and a quick return home, not a summons. Days later, he stood within the living halls of the Violian Palace, walls pulsing with bioluminescent light, air humming with alien power. Every step felt like trespassing into myth. The throne room opened like a vast cathedral, and upon the throne sat the alien queen, towering and radiant, her crown a ring of floating crystal. Her gaze locked onto Ethan with an intensity that made his knees weak. The rescued princess stood beside her, alive and watching him with unreadable eyes. The queen spoke, her voice echoing in his mind more than his ears. "Human, the person whose life you saved yesterday is my daughter, and you will marry her." Silence crushed the chamber. Ethan thought he had misheard, his mind scrambling for logic. "Marry her me, I am just a mechanic." The queen rose, her presence overwhelming. "By our law, a life debt of royal blood is repaid by union. You saved my heir without knowing her worth. That honor binds you to us." The princess looked conflicted, but did not deny the decree. Ethan felt fear, disbelief, and a strange spark of awe all at once. He realized that saving a life had just rewritten his own. Ethan found his voice at last, though it trembled. "Your Majesty, I did not save her for reward or obligation. I cannot accept a marriage forced by law." Gasps rippled through the court, such defiance unheard of. The queen's eyes narrowed, not with anger but curiosity. "Few dared refuse me, human, fewer still with honesty." The princess stepped forward, her tone firm. "Mother, he speaks truth. His courage was choice, not duty." For a long moment, the queen considered them both. Then she laughed, a sound like thunder rolling across stars. "Very well, the law remains, but the path will change." She declared that Ethan would stay as a guest, not a prisoner. He would learn Violian ways, and her daughter would learn humanity. Only if both chose the bond freely would the marriage proceed. Ethan bowed, relief washing through him. He had stood before an alien queen and kept his will. Yet as the princess met his eyes, something unspoken passed between them, a connection born not of decree, but of shared fate. Part 4. Growing Bonds. Weeks turned into months within the palace. Ethan learned alien customs, music sung in harmonics humans could barely hear, and combat dances that doubled as meditation. The princess, named Lyra, learned human stories, laughter, and the strange comfort of simple meals shared in quiet rooms. They sparred in training halls and debated under star-filled domes. Lyra was curious, fierce, and burdened by destiny. Ethan saw beyond the crown to the person she was never allowed to be. One night during a festival of lights, Lyra admitted her fear. "I was raised to rule, not to choose. You were the first to see me as someone worth saving, not owning." Ethan answered softly, "You are more than a title, and I am more than a tool of tradition." Their bond deepened naturally, not as captor and captive, but as equals learning each other's worlds. Whispers spread through the court, not of scandal but of hope. The queen watched from afar, measuring not power but sincerity. At last, the queen summoned them again. The throne room felt different now, less threatening, more solemn. The queen spoke without ceremony. "The time has come to decide, tradition or truth." Lyra stepped forward first, her voice steady. "Mother, I choose him, not because law demands it, but because my heart does." Ethan followed, meeting the queen's gaze without fear. "I choose Lyra, not as a reward, but as a partner." The queen studied them, then inclined her head. "Then the union is blessed, not by debt, but by will." Cheers echoed through the palace, a rare sound of joy rather than obedience. As preparations began, Ethan reflected on how a single act of kindness had bridged species and reshaped empires. He had saved a life in the dust of a forgotten moon. In return, he had found love, purpose, and a future among the stars. And the alien queen smiled, knowing that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged not by power, but by choice. The celebration did not end the story. It only revealed how heavy the future truly was. Across the Violian dominion, news of the queen's blessing spread like solar fire. Some worlds rejoiced at the symbol of unity, while others whispered fear and resentment. To many nobles, Ethan Cole was not a hero or a partner. He was an unpredictable variable, a human who had walked into royal destiny without bloodline or pedigree. Ethan felt the pressure immediately. Every corridor he walked carried eyes that measured him, not with curiosity, but calculation. Every council gathering was a battlefield of smiles and veiled hostility. He had married the queen's daughter, but he had not yet earned the empire's trust. Lyra sensed it too. She had grown up beneath scrutiny, but now it followed Ethan instead, and that hurt her more than any insult aimed at herself. She found him one evening standing beneath the open dome, staring at the spiral galaxy slowly rotating overhead. "You are thinking about leaving," she said softly, not as accusation, but as fear. Ethan did not deny it. "I never wanted to be a weakness you have to defend," he replied. "I came from a world where strength is proven, not inherited." Lyra placed her hand over his, her bioluminescent markings glowing faintly. "Then let them test you," she said. "Let them see what kind of strength humans carry." The test came sooner than either expected. The Outer Clans, a powerful faction loyal to tradition alone, invoked an ancient rite known as the Trial of Worth. By Dominion law, any consort to the royal line could be challenged if their presence threatened stability. The trial was not a duel of blades, but of endurance, wisdom, and sacrifice. Failure would not mean death, but exile, permanent removal from the royal sphere. The queen summoned Ethan privately. Her presence was quieter now, less overwhelming, but no less formidable. "You may refuse," she told him. "No one would call you a coward, the law allows it." Ethan looked at her steadily. "If I refuse, your daughter will always stand alone beside me," he said. "I will not let that be her burden." The queen studied him for a long time, then nodded once. "Then face the trial as you are, not as they expect." The first trial was endurance. Ethan was taken to the ash fields of Morax, a planet where gravity crushed the weak and storms burned like fire. Violian challengers relied on natural resilience and ceremonial armor. Ethan wore none, only a simple pressure suit modified by his own hands. For 3 cycles, he crossed the fields, repairing broken beacons left by previous trials, carrying injured competitors when he found them collapsed. When his body failed, he rested. When his breath broke, he adapted. He did not conquer the land, he endured it. Observers began to whisper that human strength was not loud, but relentless. The second trial was wisdom. Before the High Council, Ethan was presented with simulated crises, rebellions, famine, border wars. Each solution would favor one species over another, one system over the rest. Many consorts before him had failed by choosing dominance. Ethan chose compromise, infrastructure, shared survival. He spoke of Earth's mistakes, of wars won and futures lost. He admitted humanity was flawed, but capable of learning. Some counselors scoffed, others listened. The third trial was sacrifice. Ethan was offered a choice. To secure permanent acceptance, he could relinquish his human citizenship, his right to ever return home. No consort before him had accepted this burden. Lyra stood watching, her composure fracturing for the first time. The Queen did not interfere. This choice had to be real. Ethan closed his eyes and remembered Earth, rain on concrete, the smell of engines, the anonymity of being ordinary. Then he remembered the ruins on Calith, a life saved without knowing why. "I will not abandon who I was," he said at last, "but I will not walk away from who I choose to be. I will serve both worlds or neither." Silence followed, deep and absolute. Then the Queen rose from her throne, her voice carrying across the chamber. "The trial is complete." Tradition had demanded loss, but Ethan had offered balance. The law bent, as it always had when the future demanded it. That night, Lyra found him again beneath the stars, tears shining in her eyes. "You could have lost everything," she said. Ethan smiled, exhausted but steady. "I already found what mattered." Far across the Dominion, dissent softened into respect. Stories spread not of a human who married a princess, but of one who carried storms without breaking. The Queen watched from her balcony, ancient and thoughtful. She had once demanded a marriage as repayment for a life. Now she understood that the greater debt was hope. And humanity, fragile and fierce, had just taken its first true step into the heart of the stars. The trials changed more than opinion, they changed expectation. For the first time in generations, the Violian Dominion began to imagine a future not carved entirely from tradition. Ethan was no longer introduced as the human consort, but as the bridge-bearer, a title earned rather than granted. Lyra stood beside him in council chambers, no longer alone beneath the weight of destiny. Yet peace never arrives without resistance. Beyond the borders of the Dominion, rival empires watched closely, interpreting unity as vulnerability. Among them was the Car Syndicate, a war-driven coalition that believed empathy to be weakness. They saw the human consort as proof the Dominion had softened. The first strike came without warning. Trade lanes collapsed into chaos as car raiders crippled relays and captured civilian vessels. The Dominion Council demanded retaliation, old instincts roaring back to life. Lyra listened, her jaw tight, her eyes searching Ethan's face. He spoke quietly, but the room leaned toward him. "If they want to test our strength, let us show them what unity looks like, not fury." Against expectation, the Queen allowed him to lead the response. Not as a commander of fleets, but as an architect of outcome. Ethan proposed a human concept alien to most of the Council: rescue first, response second. Dominion ships were dispatched not to attack, but to retrieve captives, repair stations, and broadcast open channels. The message was simple: return what you have taken, and there will be no war. The car laughed until the rescue succeeded. Human adaptability, combined with Violian technology, outpaced every projection. Captured civilians returned home with stories not of terror, but of cooperation. Still, the car prepared for war. Lyra and Ethan stood together on the command deck as fleets gathered, stars bending around engines of unimaginable power. Lyra felt the old fear rise within her, the fear of ruling through destruction. Ethan sensed it. "Whatever happens," he said, "we choose who we are before the first shot." When the car fleet crossed the border, they expected resistance. Instead, they encountered silence. Then the stars themselves seemed to speak. Ethan had ordered the deployment of a system-wide signal, human-coded and Violian amplified. It flooded every channel with proof of unity, shared histories, shared sacrifices, and the undeniable fact that humans and Violians now stood as one people. Confusion fractured the car advance. Their doctrine relied on fear, and fear could not root itself where resolve was calm. The battle that followed was brief, not because of overwhelming force, but because the car chose retreat over revelation. They withdrew rather than face an enemy they could not define. Victory was quiet. No cheers, no triumphal displays, only relief. In the aftermath, the Queen summoned Lyra and Ethan to the ancient chamber beneath the palace, a place where crowns were not worn, but forged. She removed her own crown and placed it between them. "Rule was never meant to be solitary," she said. "I forgot that." Lyra knelt, not in obedience, but in acceptance. Ethan knelt beside her, not as subject, but as equal. The Queen placed the crown upon both their heads, reshaped by living crystal into a form that responded to shared intent. From this moment, she declared, the Dominion will be guided by two perspectives. One born of legacy, one born of choice. Across the stars, the declaration echoed. A human had not replaced an alien ruler, nor had an empire surrendered its identity. Instead, a crown had been shared. That night, away from ceremony, Lyra and Ethan returned to the open dome where it had all begun. The galaxy turned slowly above them, endless and indifferent. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked, "the weight, the danger, the loss of a simple life." Ethan thought of the desert moon, the cry beneath wreckage, the moment that changed everything. "No," he said, "because saving one life taught me how many more were worth saving." Lyra rested her head against his shoulder. "Then let us rule not as symbols, but as guardians." And beneath the watching stars, the future of two species began not with conquest, but with promise.